What's going on? Another episode of the Chiro podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Ben Glass, and today we have a chiropractic student coming to us from Life West out in Hayward, California, Dr. to be Chris Brown. Can you get us started by just introducing yourself, letting us know a little bit about what you were up to before you chose this path to become a chiropractor?
Yeah, I came from Pleasantville, California, in East Bay, California. I went to college at UC Davis, played baseball there too. Played baseball my whole life, and I always wanted to do something really like sports medicine or or some kind of doctor route. And actually, it was my center fielder that planted the Chiro seed in my head like sophomore year. And then I ended up going to see a chiropractor my senior year of college to help my elbow. I was a pitcher. My elbow got pretty jacked up. Um, and then just the whole path just kind of like laid out and uh, ended up being one of the best decisions I made so far. Absolutely love what I do, and if you love what you do, they never have to work a day in your life, right? And so now I'm in my ninth quarter at Life West. I finished up baseball in May 2019. Then I worked two jobs, one of them being a scribe in an emergency hospital for 8 months, and then fast forward to April 2020. So literally very first Corona quarter. Yeah, my group's OG Corona babies. Call ourselves Misfits.
Okay.
You never know what's
Okay.
going on. And
Can you talk about the culture of baseball and when you reflect back on being a lifelong baseball player, how did that really help develop and mold maybe your communication skills, maybe your leadership skills, your focus on developing specific skills, but also the passion and the drive to be better? Can you kind of touch on how that's translated as a chiropractic student and just speaking to other baseball players? How does being a baseball player really prepare you in interesting ways to develop yourself into somebody who can be a great chiropractor one day, potentially?
that's a great question. So first thing that comes to mind is baseball is a game of failure. The most successful players, they fail 70% of the time. They're only successful 30% of the time, right? As a hitter, same thing as a pitcher. And it's not easy. And every single pitch is a battle, right? And you have to execute every single time. And if you make a mistake one time, you just have to be able to somehow clear it and get ready for the next pitch, get ready for the next at bat. Because if you're dwelling on the past, and that's going to interfere with how you are in the present, right? Same thing goes for an adjustment. What if your adjustment, the first one that you do, doesn't go? Are you going to be dwelling on that for the second one? Or are you going to find a way to clear it and find a way to execute your second one? I think that's crucial. It's a lot of mindset stuff, right? Um, Getting your whole team on board with the mission, the intent, whatever your guys' goal is, whether it's for just that practice, whether it's for the entire season, how are you going to set one large overarching goal and then create little goals to get you to that path so that way you have a plan, right? It's not about what's at the top of the mountain. You just got to keep your head down and go 10 feet at a time and just trust to eventually get to the top. Same thing with school. One big kind of culture aspect of school that I think really needs a transition is that students tend to compare themselves to others, whether it's in the science, whether it's in the art, the philosophy, and they either get too high on themselves because they think that they're doing really great, off to a hot start, or they get too down on themselves. And either way, either putting yourself in a hole or you're putting yourself on the high dive to go down into the hole, right? We all start here, and we're all going to end up somewhere over here, right? Who cares what happens in the middle? You got your own path. Just trust how it goes, right? And just working together, common goal, getting everyone buy in on what the mission is. Baseball has been an incredible foundation for my experience at Life West. Absolutely.
And can you also just talk about being an athlete? Because baseball is so much about hand-eye coordination and reaction time and being able to develop your body in a really unique and specific way to move so that you can get the maximum output or have the most refined amount of information being delivered through your body. Can you talk about how that parallels to learning how to adjust?
Yeah, so the hand-eye coordination is crucial. It's a lot of just trusting your body and not thinking in the moment. Like when I was first learning to adjust, I had way too many thoughts going on. It was like, 8 different things, and I'm trying to do all of them at once. And that's when training, adjusting like it's a sport is crucial, absolutely crucial. That wasn't told to me until I think like quarter five, quarter six. Once that was told me, it just like, oh, I know what to do now. Right. I'm
Mhm.
doing drills at night in my garage. I'm, eating dinner, making lunch, getting in the garage like 9:30, 10 p.m. And I created like a lap, just create your own drill session. And you don't move on to the next adjustment until you're satisfied with the three or the four that you just got in. And if they're not good, then you stay there until you get three that are good. And just that consistency is the more reps you get, the less you have to think, right? You get to a level where you become unconscious and competent, but you got to get all the way from just conscious and incompetent, and then just working your way down, becoming competent and conscious, and then you get unconscious and competent. At that point, you don't have to think when you adjust. You're just acting. You're just in your flow, and there's no better feeling than just being in your flow and not having to think, and then you're just executing everything because of the body work that you put in when no one told you need to be working.
Mhm. And one of the underlying intentions behind this project that we're working on here for Pre-Chiro, we're trying to exemplify student experiences so that we can create a shorter learning curve potentially for the incoming student. If you're getting reflective, can you look back on that first year, year and a half of chiropractic school and think to yourself, okay, you at one point were an undergrad student thinking you wanted to go in the sports healthcare direction, knowing you wanted to do something. If you knew you wanted to do chiropractic back then, are there any things that you would recommend to that student that would help you get to school and almost already be unconsciously competent at, so that you wouldn't have to think so hard about certain things, or you'd already be familiar with certain things that quite frankly you didn't have the time to familiarize yourself with, but you made the time because you knew how important it was early on in school to familiarize yourself with maybe different pathways, different options, different approaches. um, what would you give as a creative sort of prompt for you to reflect on what could be done before school to develop yourself so that maybe you can get a more value out of your first year in school, or maybe you can arrive with some already refined skills?
Yeah, totally. I think the big one is getting yourself in front of as many docs as possible. A big one too is that a lot of people just think that there's just one technique, right? Majority diversified per se, correct? And it's tough kind of knowing the different ones, but you can get yourself in front of as many different types of docs, see their office, see their flow, maybe even become a chiropractic assistant. Like they will teach you. If you just ask, like, hey, how'd you do that? How'd you learn how to do that? They will show you, and they'll let you, sometimes they'll even let you do it on them and just try. And that's the one way that you're going to learn how to do this stuff is just trial and error. And if you get in touch with a doc that's willing to teach you on the side, like if you can bring in a sibling or just bring in a friend, and they can just show you a flow, show you a move outside of their office hours, you're already ahead of the game. And if like there's some students that come in and they've already know how to do some stuff. They don't know what they're doing, but they're like, I know how to move, right? And I think that's crucial. And just understanding the flow, understanding the purpose, the intent behind everything, knowing that the science is what's helping you make the clinical decisions. But I mean, we have plenty of students that didn't even have a science background and they're killing it in school. So it's yeah, you just gotta trust yourself a lot of
I
that.
was going to ask you about that because they did change the entrance requirements in recent years where you can get into school with non-science backgrounds. You do still see success amongst your peers that are kind of coming in from wildly different backgrounds and still able to make it through the program.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, like I said before, like everyone starts at point A, everyone ends up at point B. What happens in the middle is irrelevant, right? And yeah, those who don't have a science background, I mean, it's tough for them. It's a lot. It's a lot of school. Like, there's no denying that. And eventually they're going to find their niche and what aspect of the human body that they, fall in love with. For me, it's neurology. I'm a huge neuro nerd. I did,
Okay.
yeah, I did neurobiology in college when I was playing ball too,
Okay.
and it really gave me a strong foundation for school. I ended up tutoring 3 neurology classes throughout this past year, mainly being neuromuscular physiopathology, and just trying to guide as many of the students, especially those without science backgrounds, to just make this stuff seem easy, because it's not. Yeah.
Let's deconstruct what functional neurology is and what chiropractic neurology is. They might be two different things given the context of the subluxation or the context of what you're doing with the adjustment. Can we start there and then maybe transition into some of the more specialized training with functional neurology?
Sure. Yeah. From my understanding, functional neurology is able to use not just an adjustment to facilitate retraining neural pathways, whereas they can do actual like neurology training with eyes, with verbal cues, hearing as well, to stimulate different parts of the brain that in which those neural connections are not appropriately firing at the right time in the right place. I think chiropractic neurology is using removal of the subluxation to help clear the connection with brain and body. And I know that you can do cues in like mid adjustment to stimulate specific parts of the brain. For instance, I think there's an example where, say, you're doing a cervical adjustment, and you can tell a patient to like look to the left or like blink with their eye, and I don't know what part of the brain they're stimulating with that, but it's targeting something. Something's happening, and then you make an adjustment, and you just created an entire connection, and then your brain just starts going to work with that. Yeah, I don't have the strongest foundation on explaining that. I don't know if
Hey,
I.
hey, hey, let's not downplay how strong your foundation is. If you tutored 3 classes, let's get into that. What are some of the topics that you're helping students with? Because obviously it's not the easiest or most straightforward of topics.
Yeah, so the big one for the neuromuscular physiopathology classes, we start at a nerve cell. You start at the anatomy of it, how it works, what it does, and you make your way all the way down from a nerve impulse, traveling down a nerve to a different nerve to a muscle, how it's going to make that muscle work, what's happening in the muscle, all the different interactions in there. And then we broaden it into sensation, temperature, pain, how that actually works in your brain. Then you go output like motor control, reflexes, lesions, different pathologies mixed in every lecture. Then we finish with tracks and understanding how your spinal cord is a series of elevators, and each elevator is specific, because if it wasn't specific, is there wasn't already a predetermined organization of information going to your brain be overloaded. Like, there's millions of stimuli constantly, and your brain is just filtering out which ones does this earth vessel, this earth suit, need to be appraised of at any given moment. And there's so much more going on behind the scenes than what a human is actually physically aware of. It's incredible.
Hmm. I was going to ask because have you heard of James Chestnut? Do you know who he is?
Mm-mm.
Okay. So go to the library this week and grab volume 1 of James Chestnut's The Scientific and Philosophical Validation of Chiropractic in the Wellness Paradigm. And go to the page. There's only one page in the whole book that has a diagram on it, and it takes up the entire page. And it's kind of like how Dr. Dan Murphy does it, where he draws 20 things on one page with arrows going in every direction. But go to that page, and I think that it'll really help you drive home all of this stuff that you've been studying in the recent 2 years to distill it down into one diagram. And
Mm-hmm.
it'll make a lot more sense to you than it does to, say, other people that haven't done what you just did of tutoring people and obviously doing well in neurology and maybe just wanting a one pager that can kind of be a working model for you to maybe draw small things for patient, or just
Mhm.
work with that, play with that, reflect on that. It's I think it's called like the neurology of subluxation, and it's just got, the thalamus, the basal ganglia, the substantia nigra, the cerebellum, the spinal tracts, and what I love about it, and the reason you got me thinking about it, is because you said so much is beneath our conscious perception, right? Like 98% plus is beneath conscious perception.
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. And there is a chart that um, I showed for the first time in my very last tutoring session. I'm actually done tutoring now. I did it for 5 quarters, and the reason why is because I want to start doing health talks in the public. So I want to take the next step, going from just talking to early students in the program to now talking to the layman and getting more practice facilitating those conversations at their level, just because I have just way too many thoughts going on at a given moment. But I
Hmm.
did show them a chart that just tied in the entire quarter. And then it starts going in on how the nervous system impacts the immune system, how the nervous system impacts all of your gut, visceral function, balance. Just, oh man, there's so much going on. It's incredible. But yes, those flow charts.
What do you think tutoring did for you, just as far as being a better teacher? Because tutoring or being tutored both help you become a better teacher. And I'm just curious, because obviously you're working one on one. Usually, sometimes it's one on three, but in general, it's one on one. And obviously, with working with patients, you're going to be working one on one. What do you think that it's done for you as far as your interpersonal communication skills?
Huge, tremendous growth from it. My first 3 quarters, I did large group tutoring for neuromusc physiopathology, in which I had the first couple quarters, I had like 6, 8 students. The 2 quarters I got in person, which was summer and winter. The first couple lectures I gave, there was 30 kids in there, and I was in the classroom. I had the projector up, and it was so cool just flowing and answering their questions. That was an incredible experience. And at the same time, I also did small group tutoring, so one-on-one, one-on-twos. I did that for central nervous system, peripheral nervous system, also embryology. But the nervous system stuff is my jam. And
Mhm.
developing these skills to break things down, paint a picture in their heads. I'm a very visual person. I understand some people are more auditory. And so being able to verbally speak a picture of this, whatever mechanism is going on, kind of helps cater to both types of learners. I know there are some that are tactile, they need to draw things out. And I try to show as many pictures as I can. But being able to verbally speak images of these processes, of these flows, using my hands to orient them on where things are going, breaking information down, that's been crucial. And just understanding how students need to learn, because the information needs to be taught to them a different way. If they're not getting it from the teacher, then that teacher's flow isn't not necessarily resonating with them, and so they need something explained a different way, maybe on a more simplified level, so that way they can understand the language that the professor doctor is teaching. That's been huge for me personally. I am big on mechanisms. I always want to know how things work, why things work, what's happening. I personally struggle with bullet points. So for my explanations, I'm able to create a story of almost every slide. And then I can point out this is what it's going to hit on. This is going to hit on. Let's create a filter. Let's create a lens to look at these lectures in a different way. And I think that's been the crucial part for students. And I personally, I get good feedback. I get students in the hallways randomly, just people who had me a couple quarters ago, 3 quarters ago, and like, I was doing it over Zoom. It was just their names on the screen. I don't know who these people are. So that's rewarding. But just want to make sure that that foundation is present for all the students that are going through. Just because if you can link this stuff, eventually link it to chiropractic, then you can defend it. Done. Game over.
Yeah, what finish that thought, what's the purpose of being able to defend an idea or being able to defend chiropractic? Why is that so valuable in your mind?
Because no one does what we do. Yeah. And there is no other profession that can detect and correct a vertebral subluxation in a specific objective way. Knowing when and when not to adjust is crucial. And being able to back your decisions up with the clinical science that your science intelligence skills that you have developed in your time in school.
Mm-hmm.
If you can back up your decisions with science, then you're golden. And there's the more that you learn, the more you know you don't know. And that's been the name of the game for me the past 6 months. I've been trying to pick out different aspects of the human body that I think the public doesn't have enough knowledge of. And just reading this, like, books that I've chosen, this has been wild, getting exposed that, like, wow, I really don't know a whole lot. Which
Can you
means,
just touch on some of those systems or some of those books or some of the resources that you've been getting kind of juiced up about?
oh yeah, totally. So first one, I wanted to dive into how the immune system is impacted by the nervous system, especially in today's world, what has happened in the past couple of years. It has been very, get this and you're good, or if you don't get this, you're screwed. And there's way more to it. And so the first book I read, I wanted to understand how our cells actually kill viruses and pathogens. There's a reason why everyone tells you to take vitamin C. There's a reason why everyone tells you to take vitamin D. And actually, the big one is hydrogen peroxide, but I'm not going to nerd out like crazy right now. And then the second one was a Dan Murphy chiropractic physiology, immunology concepts book. Actually, we found it in a recycle bin on campus. It was just a bunch of extras from a seminar he gave, and I found it, and I was like halfway through my virus recovery book, and I'm just like cold. And I read that, and I was floored with the information, the studies that he was pulling up throughout the past century of how the nervous system and the spine impacts the immune system. That is what's going to dictate if you are functioning correctly or not. Just because you express symptoms, just because you don't express symptoms, that doesn't necessarily mean that you are functioning optimally. And he, based on the studies that he provided in his book, he was able to link how the nervous system dictates immune system function, which is incredible because the public has no clue. I don't think it does at all. And that is definitely something I want to bring to the table and bring more awareness to. I'm picking teachers' brains, doctors' brains at school on what their immune system protocol is. I want to develop my own. And after that, I dove into a great book that I think I only have 40 pages left, Biohacking the Brain. It goes in, it's a neurologist who, her main focus group was retired NFL players who are now developing more, who are concerned about their brain health. And so she has multiple chapters devoted towards, diet is one, exercise, supplements, water intake, positive thinking. I think there's another one, but whatever. And so she breaks down the chapter in her kind of protocol, her intro protocol for a diet, and then next level, and then like next level on how to for better brain health. And they use anecdotes from not just NFL players, but overall patients too. And they have pre-post MRI brain scans that validate what she is working with. And the information is incredible. I spiel this stuff to friends and other students, like, you gotta drink your water. Like, this past week has been a lot in terms of school, and I've barely drinking any caffeine. I've just been slamming my hydro. Here, orange hydro. Look at that. Look at that. Chiropractic baby.
Mm-hmm.
And it just shows the power of water, because if your brain is built off of water, not caffeine, right? Caffeine is just preventing you from being sleepy, but it's not actually making you function more properly. right? You need in order to create energy, you need oxygen. What's the best way to get oxygen to your brain? From your blood, right? Water.
Mhm.
And yeah, there's so many. The next one I want to get into is diet. I want to get into how gut health impacts brain health, impacts mental health. I'm a big promoter of mental health, and I think that is an area that is extremely lacking in the sports world. Whether you're currently an athlete or you're a retired athlete, young, old, doesn't matter. It is something that is not considered by coaches, by fans, by teammates, and athletes need to be comfortable expressing what's going on, whether it's something physical or mental. In which case, most of the time, they're told the expectation is shut up, play till you tear something. Who cares what you got going on in your life? Just shut up and play. Do what you got to do for the team, right? Who cares?
Mhm.
So yeah, I'm
Can you
gearing up.
touch on how much time you do have available in chiropractic school compared to before chiropractic school when you were in undergrad, and maybe if you had more clear, focused energy in undergrad, that maybe you could already have been into some of this? Maybe not. Maybe, timing is everything, and maybe you weren't ready to fully synthesize and um, assimilate all this information, given that you hadn't gone through what you've gone through in the first 9 quarters of chiropractic school. But how much of this do you find to be relevant to the pre-chiro student?
So my experience is unique because I was a student athlete in college at a difficult undergrad. The UCDF was not easy. I had my GEs were tough too. Like there was no break. And especially during season, traveling, doing online school on road trips, balancing school, baseball, home life, that translated extremely well to chiropractic school, balancing the load of all the classes, having a plan every day, laying out what I need to get done in the week, and then breaking that down to what I need to get done per day, laying out a plan and executing it, being efficient, time management, but also giving yourself some care too. Getting out, getting my hikes in, getting out playing golf with my buddies, getting my workouts in, doing what I need to do to keep me grounded with myself, with my family, with the world, allowed me to be a better student. There are a lot of students that just go gung ho, perma school, that's it, and they get burnt out because they're not taking care of themselves. And the way to do that is doing things they love to do, right?
Mhm.
The balance, definitely, student athlete experience was tremendous. That really helped the first few quarters get me off to a really good start in terms of balancing school, balancing myself. I was able to handle the load very well. And that's when I was comfortable taking on the role of a tutor and starting to hammer my thoughts, my mindset, my approaches into those students who maybe they feel like they're kind of drowning a little bit, right? I always tell them like, get ahead, stay ahead. Same thing with pitching, right?
Mhm.
And the moment that you start falling behind, you created a snowball, and now you have to stop one snowball. But once one snowball starts, especially in chiropractic school, you realize there's about 10 others, and it's really hard to keep them in check. So definitely getting ahead, staying ahead, studying early and often, not procrastinating on tests because they'll catch up. Midterms are quick, finals are quick, boards, that's a big one. And then now I'm in clinic, right? And I did last quarter was tough. Last quarter was definitely the hardest one because my schedule and myself became tertiary to clinic hours and patient availability, right? I'm trying to get my foundation of patients. I'm trying to get myself set up so that way at least I have a foundation, right, for my next quarters. So that way I can just take in a couple patients here and there, just adding on to what I got. So I put a lot of effort and time into clinic last quarter, and my schedule suffered because of that. So for me, one of the intentions goals that I set for this quarter was creating more boundaries and when I'm available and when they can come see me, better communication for my parents, just laying down more guidelines. Like my intent is for my clinic experience to be like my first practice. And it's just a lot more awareness of aspects of running your own practice that I wasn't aware of until just throwing myself in the fire and realizing, like, oh snap, like I should be doing school right now. Instead, I got this patient. Maybe I can try and find a different time for them to come in, so that way I can start doing classes this time. Tell them, hey, I'm not going to be there on Wednesday. That's my day off. Sorry. So definitely setting more boundaries in clinic, I think, will help me live a much more balanced lifestyle, just like I had been doing prior to clinic. So that's something that I'm working on. There's always something to work on. So that's a big one too. Just establishing your goals, executing them.
You've mentioned that your interests are somewhat broad in regards to, gut brain health, immune nervous system health, connection. And then also, I was introduced to you from a pretty straight chiropractor who adjusts upper cervical. I'm not sure if that's how you know him or if you know him maybe through the IFCO. But you said that clinic, you want it to be your first experience, like as having your own practice. What are some of the things you've learned that you carry with you to clinic that is going to help you make that more your first practice? Like, what are the specificities in how you manage care, how you communicate care, how you deliver care, that are going to help you feel as though you're taking your theory to practice, but also that this is as close to a real world experience as you can imagine yourself having once you get out. Because in order for you to make that statement, you already have to have some clarity in what your vision for yourself is upon graduation, what type of practice you want to have. Obviously, it's going to get refined with time, but can you speak to some of what I just mentioned there?
Absolutely. So at first, I thought that, my clinic experience would be, okay, I just got to take a history, just got to do an exam, get the paperwork done, and then I can just go adjust them willy-nilly and just, talk facts when they're laying on a table, and that'll be good, right? And what I have learned in the past 7 weeks or so is there's a lot more to it, right? It's how do you even just walk in when you greet them for the first time? How are you going to lay down the boundaries? Like hearing some of my upper quarter pod doc fellow interns, hearing them communicate to patients has opened my eyes into how much improvement is available for me in terms of just laying out the foundation of this. Okay, so I'm also interested in upper cervical. That's what I plan on doing in the real world once I get out. And so a majority of my patients are under upper cervical care. I still have some that are full spine, but just laying out the groundwork of how the visit is going to go. Okay. So here you're going to go into the resting room 10 minutes. Once you come out, going to get a couple scans. Then we're going to go take a history. After the history, I have to get a signature from my pod doc to move on to the exam portion. I'm going to put you back in the resting room. Once I get that signature, I'll pull you out, get more scans, do the exam. Then I have to get another signature for that. Just being abundantly clear of how your process is going to be. That way there's no question marks. That way they're not waiting around saying like, oh, what's he doing? Like, why didn't he communicate this? Almost over communicate and just constantly remind them of what's going on, how you're going to do things. The process in clinic is not how it's going to be in practice. And it is tough to reduce the friction to transaction in clinic because it's not under your own rules. So adapting to that, figuring out how to reduce that friction. What I mean by that is, like, say a patient comes in and you get everything done that you need to in that one visit, and then you can fast track PCS them, and then you can see them in that week. That is reducing friction, right? What you don't want to do is take 2-3 weeks before you even see them for the first time, because now they're already losing interest. Hearing my cohort mates talk to them in their visits, especially like pre-adjustment, post-adjustment, giving them instructions on how to facilitate a better lifestyle for them at home when they're not with you. Teach them how to breathe, how to how much water to consume, exercises they can do, little habits to improve their expression of life just that much better. And for me, it's using less words to make the same amount of impact integrated into them, because I end up spieling too much. So that's also something we need to work on, right? So it's, and then just constantly identifying things you need to work on and clean up.
Mm-hmm. What, just getting back to the pre-Cairo experience, what would you envision could be possible if we had students that were starting their own pre-Cairo club, which could be thought of as a parallel to you going into clinic and starting your own Cairo student practice in clinic? Um, what are some of the possibilities that that creates as far as um, one-on-one communication, one-on-many in your local community where you're trying to share what it is that you do, or you're trying to reach people. It can you see the parallels there between what you're experiencing right now and what you could have experienced had you started your own club, and maybe had some advisory and some mentorship as far as materials to hand out or share, and as far as events that you can throw to raise awareness that you're available for people. But I'm just curious if the experience that you're going through right now, if you can see, or maybe just speak to what you're going through right now, and then maybe we can tie that back to how a pre-Cairo club could grow organically through referrals, and or um, what it's like to ask somebody to make an investment out of their own pocket in your services, in coming to see you and coming to work with you. The same thing with the club. Hey, join our club, invest in it. It'll benefit you in these ways. I know that I'm answering some of my own question, but I'm just curious if you could give me some reflections on what I just shared.
Yeah. So I think a crucial one is just how are you going to run your day in your office? Like what does a day in your office look like? How does your week look like? How does your patient visit look like? Are you able to successfully navigate them through their visit, reducing the amount of questions as possible while providing the as much information that you can, being empathetic with them, hearing them, listening to them, not just being in the back of the head of the computer, like actually tune in to what they're expressing, understand that the reason that they're there for you is not because of whatever pain or whatever symptoms going on. It's because they can't do something that they used to be able to do before they had this, right? Ask them the question, if you didn't have whatever you are presenting with, how would your life look? What have you lost since experiencing this? Like, like envision your life without this. How would it look? What would that do for you? And most of the time when you ask that question, they don't even think about that. I didn't even think that, oh my gosh, I'd be able to go play with my kids again. I can be the grandparent that I want to be. I can go drive my boat again. I can go do yard work, whatever it is. Learning how to communicate, learning how to be empathetic, understanding that these people are going through something that is debilitating their quality of life, and they're coming to you to get that back. For definitely a communication aspect, I think recognizing just the energy that people are giving off. If like, okay, something's actually going on, how can I facilitate bringing awareness to this? Is that even necessary in this moment? Maybe they need a couple more visits. Laying out your expectations crystal clear. You don't want them leaving the office with questions. At least questions unanswered. They might start having more questions as they leave, right? But if they do, then it should be questions that, because of the answers that you provided, being crystal clear with what you found, explaining how the body works, explaining all the functions. A lot of it is communication information, because the general public doesn't truly understand how removing a subluxation impacts the body and really the power behind what the body is able to do. And just when you are palpating, doing adjustments, explaining what you're feeling, be try to make them almost the chiropractor too. So then they're on board, they're on the same page. And if you had a pre-chiro club, working with those aspects, the daily flow, like training how to communicate a patient that comes through with a tough case. Like what if I had a mom bring in her daughter that's 7? She's like, okay, I've seen a osteopath, I've seen a neurologist, I've seen a functional nutritionist. None of them have helped. How can you help me? What if they just drop that bomb on you? How are you going to answer? Right? Or are you just going to be just hit in the face? And you're like, oh, whoa, okay. Well, I'm going to detect if you have a subluxation, and then I'm going to facilitate the removal of that. And at that point, I'm just going to see what your body does. And just letting your own intelligence flow the way that it's supposed to. It's a lot of powerful things can happen, some that I don't even anticipate. But from, my preparation in school, removing that is the next step towards expressing your best self. And a lot of it is just communication, the right way, and not confusing them. It's key.
Okay. I appreciate you going down that path with me. I realized that it was a little bit of a tangent. You being interested in upper cervical, would you say that what types of people are attracted to that pathway? Because I'm really trying to illuminate the different styles and pathways that, based on the types of people, certain pathways attract certain people. If you can look at the student body, or at least your peers, and maybe characterize some of the different pathways that you see people heading in based on their strengths or their character. Can you kind of just uh, basically give a quick rundown on yourself, why you were attracted to certain things, and then also some of your peers that you see side by side with you, and what they're attracted to for which reasons, and you can specify which types of pathways.
Yeah. So my observations and experiences, full spine care is they're all great. There's a place for every single one of them. For me, full spine care can be more palliative, more so, okay, let's get this quick fix, let's clear this area, and let's get you back out doing what you love doing. Absolutely, there's a place for that. Acute injuries, more so going towards full spine care, right? More chronic, long lasting, debilitating symptoms, that's going to end up progress towards upper cervical care, just because the top 2 bones in your vertebra, that's where the brainstem is, and there's just so much. That's the closest connection to your brain. So people who have history of concussions, that's a crucial one. Those who have history of mental health symptoms, that can go towards upper cervical. Cases that aren't being explained, I mean, fibromyalgia, that's a key one. Like, no one can explain that, and yet if you're able to turn off the pain pathway and turn on your own pain suppressing pathway, the endogenous opioid, then you can really clear up a lot of that. Upper cervical is a lot more chronic cases, and you can help facilitate acute cases as well. It's just what is in your scope, what is your ideal patient, and if they're not in that, not being married to every patient, be like, hey, I got a great full spine guy 2 blocks down, he's phenomenal, I'm gonna go refer you to him because you're gonna be a great patient for them. There you go. You always have the patient's best interest in your mind, no matter of if they're going to be your patient or if they're going to be needing to be someone that you refer to someone else. You always have the best interest in their mind. You always have the best resources available for them, and you are going to be the guide towards getting them what they need.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay. What are some resources that you recommend people go to learn more about upper cervical? What are some of the places that you've found just as a great resource, maybe an abundance of information that is not readily accessible to the average chiropractic student, or maybe would be a great deep dive for somebody who's really looking to learn more about upper cervical?
Yeah. I think looking it up, like I mean, I wasn't exposed to it at all until school. I was actually a low back patient, and I was getting divvied up every week. Felt great, but I had to go every week. Got my first ever cervical adjustment, just contacting my neck, cleared my low back pain for like a month. I was like, oh, okay, this is different. And that's actually a tough question because I don't think there really is a whole lot of information out there. I think the public doesn't even know that there's a difference. You know, every office just is chiropractic for the most part, right? And I think it's just bringing more awareness that there are different approaches towards chiropractic, all which work, all which are great. I think this is like they don't even know where to start. They never even heard about it. I've never even heard about it. A lot of students haven't even heard about it. I have a friend at Palmer who asked me like, "What's toggle? What's knee chest?" I'm like, "Well, right." So I think it's more public awareness. I don't know if it's through social media or through marketing, through sales, but there really is not a foundation at all for upper cervical, but yet people will find you, and it's because everything else before that has not worked, and so you're end up being a lot of patients' last hopes.
My question was more about resources for students that are interested in upper cervical. So
Mm,
like one that I remember was really amazing was the Erickson book. You familiar with
mm,
that Erickson book?
mm,
Oh, okay. Go check out the textbook on all the research related to the upper cervical complex, written by Erickson. It's pretty thick. It's pretty, like, if you got really excited about that immune nerve connection by Dan Murphy, this Erickson book is like, what research do we have connecting upper cervical to concussions? What research do we have connecting upper cervical to digestive issues? What research do we have connecting upper cervical to low back pain? And he just has lists of different studies. And the book is pretty thick. It's a textbook. It's got multiple editions. And I remember that being like, when I found that resource, I was like, why haven't we been told about this text? Because there's so many of them in the library, but definitely go check that one out because as somebody who, like you, or you like to consume relevant information that you can then maybe add to your communication or just add to your awareness of all the different connection points, that book is dedicated. I mean, it's the number one, I want to say it's like the number one science based upper cervical book for the budding chiropractic student. I gotta say that.
okay.
Um,
Yeah. Okay. I'm gonna have to read that. You just got me excited.
I mean, isn't it kind of crazy to think about you and your background and your focus and not have heard of that and you're already 9 semesters in? Like, what if you would have heard about that book in pre-Chiro and gotten exposure to all these different studies and you have time to actually go through the studies? Um, this is where I think the potential of pre-Chiro to really focus a student in on what makes them tick, what gets them excited, and also leave a bunch of breadcrumbs that they can carry with them into chiropractic school. Like, this is why I'm going to chiropractic
Mm,
school. And you got a book this thick full of references to different journal articles that you can go and you can, make little informational videos on simplifying the message of these different studies, stuff like that. You know what I mean?
yeah. No, that would be huge. I mean, shoot, just thinking about what I could be right now if I had read that textbook, quarter one, quarter two, or maybe even before, like the foundation that you would end up having would be tremendous.
Yes, going through the science, the hardcore science part of the program with these parallel reference texts, not only just you personally as the person who seems to go beyond the classroom and do much more than what's just given to you as a student, but also what about all your peers? If all of you were studying that together and somebody made a discovery and was like, oh, you know, remember when we heard about this here? I found what they were talking about over here, blah blah blah, making those connections.
Yeah, I mean that's actually a great point because the student body we're learning so much science, yet we're not able to communicate it through a chiropractic lens. We just think in terms of how it's taught to us. We just think in terms of how we need to think about it for boards,
Yeah.
and we don't know how to communicate that in terms of the public. So that's a great point.
So yeah, that's it right there. What you just mentioned is making the program more chiropractic relatable, so that people can relate this medical information that they're having to study, and regurgitate on tests to at the same week, at the same time, they're seeing how that information is actually able to be communicated through a chiropractic lens or thought of through a chiropractic lens, um, or even expressed through the art, um, of working with people with that mindset of or awareness of like, oh, I just took a test on this system or this organ or this tissue, and look at me now actually touching this area and listening to this area and relating to this area. um, this is how I believe the chiropractic education gets leveled up, gets upgraded, you know.
Yeah, I would totally agree with that. I mean, even myself, I personally do not think that I have a strong foundation in communicating scientific information through a chiropractic lens. So that's something that I'm also aware of and trying to work on. And at least I have the science to as a starting point. But I mean, if I had that quarter one even beforehand, then I already have a gist of how to talk, how to think. Man, that'd be a game changer. Absolutely.
Because let's be honest, Chris, your education is not cheap.
Hmm.
Every hour that you sit in class is at least 25, if not $40, that you're reaching in your pocket and you're saying that I'm going to put this into an account and it's going to say student loan account. I don't know your personal situation, but this is the vast majority of students. And when you get out of school, that number is going to look pretty big. Maybe most people won't be that intimidated by it because it's just like you said, like you don't climb the mountain today. You just take 10 steps ahead, $1 at a time. Um, there needs to be a more valuable experience as a standard, as a base for the average student. Their experience is like down here, it needs to be up here. Bottom line. I mean, it's too expensive not to think that that's important. You know what I mean? And there's a reason why Palmer closed, you know. They can say all the things they want about the cost of their campus, but there's a lack of enrollment because nobody knows what chiropractic education offers to you. And then B, it's really expensive. It's kind of intimidating to the average person. Nobody's going to want to go and commit to that unless they've gone through so much so and developed such a strong foundation and have such a clarity of a vision and a focus that they can rationalize the decision.
Hmm. Yeah, I think that's a great idea, and it's very true. Like we're taught how to pass boards. We're not taught enough of how to be a chiropractor in the real world, which is why when interns graduate and become docs, it's a struggle. It's not easy because they don't even know what they're doing. All I
Mm-hmm.
know is just sports material. All they know is somehow to apply an adjustment to that stuff, and then you don't get the patient communication, you don't get the business, you don't get how to work with a team, you don't understand why you're doing certain things, you can't explain it through your lens, you're explaining it through a board's lens. And yes, there's much more that can be done in terms of the approach of the education and how that goes.
I appreciate you taking the time. I'm just going to leave it at this. Is there anything that you envision, just because you have been somewhat of a leader, a person that people look to guide them? Have you had any thoughts of what your legacy will be at that school that you're at when you leave, anything you want to leave behind for the next generation, for the next set of cohorts. Maybe you've already done a number of things, but is there anything that you're working towards? Or can you reflect on anything that you for sure have already done that is going to be available to students as they arrive? Because I think that once you get to quarter nine, you know you've done a bunch of stuff, right? You've got insight, you've got context you can give back.
Yeah. So one aspect that I preach and that I hope the kind of student body as a whole embodies is that you're putting in the work to succeed, not because you fear failing. That is a mindset that I see time and time again where students are like, oh, I'm just trying not to fail this test. I'm just trying, just hoping to pass boards or try not to fail boards. And it's the intent behind all their effort, all their energy they're putting in towards studying, towards working on adjusting. It's because they're scared of messing up. And you can't have that thought. That's not sustainable. You're going to burn out. You're going to get to a time where when you do fail, you're not going to be able to handle it. You're not going to be able to clear, reset, move on because of what is fueling your desire to put in work. And that's something that I come across often through my neuromus tutoring. And just when, as soon as I explain that, you just see a different flip in their eyes. Like, holy crap, I've been doing this for so long. Like, whoa. And it really helps kind of clear, reset them. And then they study with a new purpose. And that way they actually enjoy the process. Because that's another thing too, is the student body as a whole is very results based. It's like, okay, once I'm out of this class, then I'll be happy. Then I'll be good, right? Once I pass bone and joint, oh, I don't have a worry in the world. No, you're going to have worries. Class just keeps getting harder, right? But if you just enjoy the process, enjoy learning, enjoy lessons, right? Not failures, but lessons. There's always a different positive way to look about it. And I think for me, it's the mindset of the student body culture as a whole can gravitate towards more process-based, enjoying the process and the intent behind the work for success, not because you're scared to fail.